Good morning. Coffee time. Another work week survived. I watched a video from myself, which I usually don't do that. And I never edit my videos, that's why sometimes I'm grasping for words. Like Tool, which is Werkzeug in German. Anyway, I wanted to talk about memetics or memetic, and there used to be an Egyptian Neteru, which is like a sub-god, or I think that the Egyptians had the most complicated or the most esoteric religion that ever existed, unless Atlantis existed, but I'm not going to speculate on that. So there was one god in Egypt, and I think his name was Kem, and his name is Kem, and he's usually represented as I don't know, this frog figure. And here you even have him with Crowley's hat on. So there's a thing called meme magic, and supposedly it was also used in Egypt because they used hieroglyphs, and these are real entities. So I could show you on the Kabbalah where Kem emanates from, and I think it's Hod, which is at the left hip point. So Kem is also supposedly can be used to jump from one Sephira to another Sephira, because he's a frog and he can jump. So there are no real rules in magic or in the astral realm or in lucid dreaming. And if you use the Kabbalah, and the Kabbalah is not really a religion, it's more like a scaffolding where you have a system, and even your emotions are in like the triangles between the lines and so on. So the Kabbalah is maybe the most ancient magical system, and that makes it very powerful, and that's also why many of these Illuminists are into the Kabbalah, because it's so old. And Kabbalah usually just means to receive. So if you have the Kabbalah here, and you would look at Yesod, which means foundation. So this is Malkut, the earth, and above it is Yesod. Yesod means foundation, and Yesod is the place where the stars are at. So if you just jump to Yesod, you are at the height of the stars, and God is like 3 times further away. So it's very interesting to learn about the Kabbalah, but also it could be deceiving, as I already said, because I was in contact with a guy who worked for a very famous quadrillionaire family, and they owed him money, and so he made his life's purpose to destroy them with their own tools, which is magic. And he's still trying to gather an army of magicians somewhere. And I must have listened to hundreds of hours of just him talking. And after the first video, I was still very skeptical. After the, I don't know, 10th video, I saw that this guy, if he was a storyteller, he should work for Hollywood, because the story that he told was so incredible and so voluminous that the Lord of the Rings trilogy is nothing compared to that. And I call him Tom Riddle because that's his initials. And also, according to legend, he could have been the idea for J.K. Rowling's book Harry Potter, where there was this evil magician, and in the end they have to destroy all his stones, and which they call Horcruxes or something. And I think the last 3 books are just about destroying the evil stones of Tom Riddle or Voldemort. So he could have very well been, according to his friend, he could have very well been an inspiration for the character, not in the first books but later on, because they really were concerned that he would bring this knowledge out. And he said, just to piss these people off, I'm just giving out to YouTube for free, just so that these people know that there are like a few hundred or 1,000 people out there who just watch YouTube videos who know more about magic than MI5 and MI6 combined. So that was his motive. He did it out of hate. And that was another reason for me to believe him. Also, when he did a ritual, like I said, the bright blue sky would turn like nearly black. The dogs in the park slash cemetery where he did his rituals would become aggressive out of nowhere and would go at each other. And when he invoked Hecate, that's one of the moon goddesses, things would happen, like wind would rush in and nearly knock down all his equipment. And later on, when I did some of the things that he very, very, very slowly and eloquently explained, it worked, and the same thing would happen. Like dogs would go insane, the weather would change, wind would come rushing in when there was no cloud in the sky, things like that. So and yeah, so, and he used, that's what I want to talk about. He used to talk about meme magic, that there's a thing which was massively used in the internet when Trump ran for president, and that was meme magic, which is where you have basically a funny story, but the image you see is a sigil, and the sigil invokes or evokes certain spiritual entities. And this also works, and I'm sure you can find all the sigils of all the demons on the internet now. And you know, just I mean, you just, everyone who says magic doesn't exist never tried to do it, in my opinion. Never earnestly tried to do that. And it's not very complicated to do. You just have to focus your intention and meditate for 3 years, 1.5 hours a day. So, and the most interesting thing that he talked about, what I can remember, was how to make a wand, and that you really can do that. And I think I still have the video on my computer, or at least the MP3. And basically how they did that is they would astral project into a tree, and you have to learn that it's not easy to learn astral projection, and it's also not very it's not without danger to do that, because you're entering the astral world basically without any protection. And there are two different ways to astral project, which is while you're awake, which they call biomass projection, and astral projection is where you train yourself to your consciousness to stay awake while your body falls asleep. And usually you could do that by visualizing a rope above your bed, and when you notice that your body is asleep, you would try to grab the rope and pull yourself out of your own body. So that would be one way to do astral projection. But I would still take a lot of what he said with a grain of salt, because he said, and that's his words, "You should not believe me. You're insane if you believe me." And basically I didn't really believe him, because I thought that he just he used to talk a lot about psychotronics, and that you have to be an ipsissimus blah 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 to make these stones, which is not true at all. Everybody can do that, so you don't have to pay anybody anything. You just have to buy yourself a few quartz crystals and learn about crystal magic, which is not the same thing as psychotronics, but at least then you have some understanding about what it's about. So you could infuse a crystal with your own energy. You could infuse a crystal with the energy of the Archangel Michael to be protected. And 1 second, please. So you could infuse a crystal, especially if it's an orb, because the energy can't leave. Once you put it in there with the wand, the energy can't leave it. So by that mechanism, what Damien Eccles is talking about, this wonderful ritual of where Crowley spent 8 months and he bought this house in Loch Ness of all places, to make this ritual, which would take him nearly a year to finish, with daily washing rituals and whatever. And you could do that in a few hours with psychotronic crystals. And you don't have to buy that from anybody. You can program these crystals on your own. So that's basically the only lie that I ever caught him in, was that he wanted to sell his stupid crystals. And basically also food for thought. There's a Christian way of witchcraft, and it's called superstition. So through faith you open yourself up to these things, which doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It only does not exist if you're an atheist and you have this fixed belief that there is nothing that you cannot see, which also then blocks you from ever receiving synchronicities or miracles, because you cannot get miracles if you don't believe in God. It's not possible. And usually, the most terrifying thing, because I listened to an exorcist several times. I listened to several exorcists over the years, but what he says was very interesting, because he says that it's not that space contains a spirit, it's the other way around. It's that a spirit or a consciousness contains space, not the other way around, which was pretty eye-opening. So unless you are fully possessed, you could never figure out what your problem is. And they have many, many names in the medical community: depression, obsessive compulsive disorder. It's all bullshit. Depression is a theological term. It always has been. It means being pressed down. And by what are you pressed down? By a spirit. So then comes obsession, where you get obsessed with, for example, obsessive compulsive disorder is where you have to I don't know, vacuum clean your house 30 times a day, and you have to put everything in right angles and so on. I forgot what I was talking about. So, by the way, this is the Kabbalah with the pillars switched. So, Hod should be here, which is Netzach. But there are also people who say that doesn't matter. I'm not an expert on that stuff, so, but it's very interesting that, for example, like even the triangles between the tunnels are emotions. Is your emotional body, and if you have the Kabbalah 4 times over, that's called Jacob's ladder, which represents your psyche, your emotions, your body and the divine, which would be the Kabbalah 4 times in a row upwards, which is called Jacob's ladder. So he used to talk about, Tom Riddle used to talk about how you could access even the Sephirah which you're not yet ready to access, because usually they unlock with maturity, or with your how you get on with your spiritual path. They would unlock, but there's also another way how to get in these higher emanations. And that would be, for example, using Chem, which is a frog, and basically jumping from one emanation to the next. Like I said, there are no rules in magic, and all these animals have their animal attributes in magic. And yeah, so what I wanted to say is, I used to listen to this exorcist, and by the way, if this is all not real, then why are there 2 working exorcists in every state in the USA, of every church, 24/7? Especially in Mexico, because the drug cartels usually put a spell on their drugs, so that they might pass the border. And many of them worship Santa Muerte, which is this lovely woman here. And that's a huge cult in Mexico, the cult of Santa Muerte, which is the cult of the Holy Death. That's one of the images that they have in their homes, these narcos traficantes, and they worship her to protect them. And I heard one testimony. His name is Chobi Xiao, and he was with the triads, and he was pretty high up because he was very young, but he was basically like a leader, or what in the mafia would be like a capo regime, or like a foot soldier, but one higher. And so he found Christ, and he said that they all are tattooed. They are not allowed to tattoo their hands, so that if they wear a suit, they look like businessmen. But they are tattooed around the neck, and usually along their life, they have so many tattoos that they are covered in tattoos. And I think he was in the Philippines, and he was with this gang, and his gang was feared as the most brutal of all the gangs. And he was at home, and he loved that lifestyle, and now he's a missionary. So his life story is incredible. He said that once a year or twice, they would all the mafia guys would go to these Hindu temples, and they would get tattoos, and the Buddhist monks would blow into the tattoos spells, so that the tattoos themselves would could be used like a shield. And he saw himself with his own eyes that people would get hit by machetes in full swing, and they wouldn't have a scratch on their arm. So they would blow these spells into these tattoos. That's also a reason why all these mafia guys are tattooed. And also, if you read the Bible, you know that it's not allowed to make markings on your body, or piercings, or scars. And so yeah, and about the Tom Riddle story, there's one thing that was still very incredible that he talked about, was how to use these very, very powerful spirits like Chem to jump from one emanation in the Kabbalah to the next emanation. So they could jump from Hod to Netzach, to Yesod, to Tiferet, and so on. And the trick how to do that is you use tarot cards, and you would make a ritual circle. You would invoke the energy of Chem into the playing card that represents him, and you would then take him and burn him. And by that mechanism, you are basically the ruler of Chem. So he has to do your bidding from then on. And you can do that with all the tarot cards. So you would have 72 demons, which is basically the whole Goetia, which is all the demons that King Solomon used for his magic. And I think there's even a story where King Solomon stole the throne or the crown of the queen of Thebes, die Königin von Theben, by the help of his demons. And you can look that up. I think the story is in the Bible. So yeah, so the knowledge of this person about not just magic, but also he was a scientist. He studied chemistry. He had a very good background in physics. He understood it mathematically. So he was a treasure trove of information. And I think I was hanging on his lips for over a year. And I was in contact with with his cameraman, who basically his friend, Duncan. And Duncan said that after they made the first couple of videos, he got a job to work for MI5 just because he knew the guy. And he, Tom Riddle, I think he wrote 3 or 4 books on just about remote viewing. And that must have been around the time where the book The Man Who Stared at Goats was written. And that's a true story, by the way. It's a comedy, but the book, I don't think that the book is in comedy. The book was written by John Ronson, and John Ronson is also a personal friend of Alex Jones. So you see where the dots connect, and yeah, pretty insane. You wake up to that, and when I started meditating and I got better and better and better, I think I did it. I invoked 2 demons, one of which was Azazel or Azazel, and the other was Ashtaroth. I think that was the spiritual kingship of the Moabites in the Bible, or the Ammonites. And the second I invoke Ashtaroth, and I think I even used his sigil to do that. I smelled sulfur. That's a fact. Don't know what to do with that information, but I smelled sulfur. And I didn't expect that at all, because I thought that would be like invoking an angel, where you have this like a subtle energy shift in the room, but it was much more powerful than that, to invoke a demon. And I smelled sulfur for like my room was smelling like sulfur for 5 minutes. How that's possible, I don't know. Thanks for listening.